Kia ora and welcome to Cinema in Context, where we discuss all things film and the connections between. My name is Jeremy Downing.
And I'm Sarah Watt.
And this month we are joined by a very special guest, the fourth time, the incredible filmmaking and film talking, Doug Dillaman. Woo!
Hello, I'm a last minute ring-in, so hopefully I can live up to the hype and live up to the quality of the franchise. I think we're spending a lot of time talking about franchise this week, aren't we?
This is exactly what we're talking about. We are talking this month, team, about Scream vs. Scream. And it's great to have you here. Team, one of us is the killer, so you'll need to wait till the end to find out who it is.
Or two of us.
Oh, true. In a game of Mafia, if that was the case, you know Mafia?
Yep.
The two killers would gang up quite openly on the one person left. So I don't know. We shall see.
I'm just saying you've come to the house of two of us. I don't favor your odds.
I'm at Doug and Sarah's house, dear listeners, right now, enjoying a lovely coffee. Sadly, William is not with us this month. He is taking a break, so wishing him the best. And we'll hopefully have him back next time when we talk about whatever it is we talk about in a month's time. On the topic of months, at Cinema in Context, we discuss two films each month, one current and one retrospective, with some connection. It could be the same director, the same actor, or a similar theme. As I've already said, this month we are discussing Scream, which was released back in 1996, which is, 25 years ago? 26 years ago?
Amazing. Doesn't feel that long.
It's a long time. And Scream, the same named film, which came out in 2022, the start of this year. Well, the connection being that they have the same name, they're from the same universe, and I'm sure many more connections that we can make. Maybe
Yes.
some more subtle than who knows. Please be warned that we will be spoilering each film in great detail, and I think it's fair to say these films have a lot of spoilers, I think also I'm potentially going to spoil some stuff in Scream 2, Scream 3,
And Scream 4.
and Scream 4.
I think that's got to be fair enough, right? You're either here for the franchise, or you need to pause it now, go away, watch the ones you want to watch, and then come back to us.
And potentially watch a helpful explainer YouTube video to fill in the gaps on the ones you haven't seen, because it is simultaneously recreating itself, but also additive through each installment.
Absolutely, and it's building to a lore of Sidney Prescott, and we can talk soon about what is added in these films, as well as they're effectively whodunits. And so once you know who the killer or killers are, you don't lose. They're still fun to rewatch, but there's a surprise there that's worth pausing this episode for and going and experiencing for yourself, and then coming back at a future date. Right, well, let's start with... Well, shall I start with Scream 1996?
Yeah, tell us what the...
Hand it over. So Scream 1996 is directed by Wes Craven. It's written by Kevin Williamson. And it's a love letter to the slasher genre, which arguably started with Psycho, was sort of codified with Halloween, John Carpenter's Halloween, and then... Through the 80s, we had a slew of slasher movies that Scream pulls from and references both directly and indirectly. It follows the character of Sidney Prescott, played by Neve Campbell, a young woman in high school with a tragic past. She's recently lost her mother, and she is sort of dealing with the grief of that whilst simultaneously dealing with her friends and school teachers and people around her being stabbed to death by a masked killer. Ghostface is the killer of the series, and that's kind of the premise. And we get to know the different characters, the different people that could or could not be the killer, and they have to navigate this journey not just through their own wiles, but through knowing the rules of scary movies.
Nicely done, yes.
Scream 1996. Doug, tell us about Scream 2022.
Well, Scream 2022 is a story set in Woodsboro, where a group of high school friends are picked off one by a knife-wielding killer wearing a ghost-faced mask, who uses a voice modulator to taunt them with questions focused on their knowledge of scary movies. As the body count mounts, will Neve Campbell's Sidney Prescott, Courtney Cox's Gale Weathers, and David Arquette's Dewey Riley be able to stop an all-out massacre during a third-act party at the home of Skeet Ulrich's Billy Loomis? Oh, and also this takes place 25 years after the original and mostly follows an entirely new group of high schoolers. And it's the fifth film in the series, and the first not filmed by Wes Craven. Instead, it's by the filmmaking team Radio Silence, who shot to prominence with Samara Weaving's starring horror film Ready or Not. So, once again, it relies on the knowledge of horror movies, but this positions itself both in the world of requel and elevated horror, which is common today, and which we can discuss as we get on how successful it is in dealing with those concepts.
Excellent. I think that's one of the fun things of this film is that each iteration doesn't just rest on its laurels in terms of what the first one did. They try and comment on what it means to be a sequel.
Absolutely.
What it means to be a trilogy, quote-unquote, closer. What it means to be a reboot. And then what it means to be what they coin in this film, a requel.
Yes. And also, the element that's introduced in Scream 2 is that in the universe of Scream, there are movies based about the killings in Scream called Stab. And so I believe the second movie begins at the Stab premiere. And then by the time we get to Scream 2022, we're up to Stab 8, which is and this is definitely, turn off now if you haven't seen Scream 2022, because this is the best thing about it, is the onboarding of the toxic fandom related to other 8th installments in series that change details about the franchise that upset the hardcore fans' true beliefs. And that was one of the most delightful things about this film is taking toxic fandom and punching it in the face.
For me, one of the most delightful things about the whole Scream franchise, and particularly right from the get-go with number 1, is how meta it was. And I remember how groundbreaking that was in 1996, that here was a horror film that broke so many things. For starters, probably the most famous person in our world at that time was Drew Barrymore. And
she was all over the posters. She was
like,
so
right.
She is the poster. It's
she's the heroine of this movie. How fabulous! And they kill her off at the very beginning. And at that moment you knew this is going to be something completely different. And then of course you've got good old Randy, the video store worker, who's the one who knows all of the horror genre in and out. And everything is so meta. And I absolutely love, and you've touched on this, Doug, the fact that 2, 3, 4, and now Scream 5, if we want to call it that just for argument's sake, is meta upon meta upon meta, and so self-referential. In a way that, if I remember rightly, the Final Destination movies, not so much. I liked Final Destination enormously, but if I remember correctly, it's basically how many new ways are there to skin a cat, right? And so it's less self-referential. This stuff is wordy and clever and part of the tricksiness as well, isn't it?
Now, did you see it in the cinema when it came out?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, we've already established that you couldn't see Kill Bill in the cinema.
Yeah, I was 10 years old
when Scream came out.
Yeah. So, it's one of the all-time great theatrical screenings for me. I saw it opening weekend with a crowd in Houston, Texas, African-American, probably about 70-80%, which tended to famously be very vocal during screenings, which can go either way. But during when it goes off for a movie like this, it's just an incredible ride, and it was so thrilling to have a movie that worked on all the levels. It was because meta entertainment wasn't really as common in pop culture.
No.
I mean, now most of our entertainment is meta, you know.
But this was really new.
Yeah. This was really groundbreaking, and so to have somebody like Wes Craven, who at that point already had Last House on the Left and Hills Have Eyes and Nightmare on Elm Street under his belt, you knew you were getting a really competent, well-done horror film, but you didn't know how kind of nod, wink to the audience it's going to be, and, you know, this kind of trivia question of who's the killer in Friday the 13th. Oh, everyone knows it's Jason. Well, actually, you know, and these sorts of things. And also just the undercutting some of the other tropes. Like, one of the consistent things I love about this series is how often Ghostface like brains himself or slips on the floor, him or herself, you know, depending on the film, and, you know, is not the unstoppable Hulk of like Jason Voorhees.
Yes,
you know,
he's not the unkillable necessarily. Yeah.
There's no other horror film that has this gimmick in it that I can think of where you don't know who the killer is consistently. Like Ghostface as an image is quite scary. Like it's a costume. Yeah. It's a $2 shop costume look, but the way that they must pad it, or they light it, or the things that they do. And I know the mask has changed slightly over time. It's scary, but it's this great conceit of like, oh, and then it's this person, and you like, yes, you're right, fallible and slips over, but also sometimes unrealistic strength for that person's frame. And
it's a weird mix of Scooby Doo almost, you know, where it's a different mystery every time, but it is that kind of...
Scooby Doo's a great connection. I had a thought of that. Back to Drew Barrymore, you know that she was cast as the Neve Campbell character. And she said to the producers, I think she's a producer on the film as well, or an executive producer or some sort of connection. She said, look, I actually want to play the girl who dies at the start because I think that'd be the most fun I would have.
Oh, that's interesting.
I will set up expectations and then it will completely, you know, in terms of the movie, me being a producer and making the best film, that makes a lot of sense to me. And I feel like I'll just have a great time doing that scene, and then I will be off the project.
And it's a callback to Psycho as well, which was famously marketed off Janet Leigh, which, spoilers for Psycho, if you haven't got around to watching it in the last 16 years.
She doesn't make it very far through the film.
Well, she makes it halfway through, right?
Well, but I mean, she's the first body.
She's not the final girl, you know.
This is true.
And Drew Barrymore is not the final girl. I think that's fascinating, Jeremy, that you say that, because in a way then... Drew Barrymore can take a heck of a lot of credit for part of the subversion that made Scream so shocking and so incredibly clever. So it becomes not just about chitter-chatter, about don't go down to the basement on your own, etc. But it is about, viewers, you do not know what is coming here. If we have killed off a Hollywood star at the beginning, then all bets are off. And this is where the big spoiler comes, readers, listeners, watchers, of course, that there are two killers in Scream. Now, in a way... in a way, it felt a little bit like, well, hang on a second, you've made it a bit easier for yourself by doing that. Because of course you can operate with a killer who's upstairs in the attic and another one who's outside the front door. But also, I don't think that had really ever been done before. And so, how incredibly clever and additionally frightening, because as you say, all we're looking at is the ghost face mask and the black robe. It literally could be anybody that you know, and that is absolutely the most petrifying thing.
That's the thing about Scream that always impresses me, bar one film, which we can talk about in the series, which is the balance between the meta and the kind of comedic elements, or the nose-tapping elements, and it genuinely being a scary movie with suspense and stakes and characters you care about.
Yes, and there's not many movies to the violence as well, which is very confrontational.
Except for Scream 3.
Okay, which I have. So I've only seen Scream 1, 2, and 5.
Well, let's do it, because I'm keen to do this, and then we can talk about Scream 3. So Scream 1, and maybe should we do just whether you've seen it and 5-star review. Sarah, what?
Definitely saw Scream 1. I don't think I was into rating at the time, but I probably would have gone 5 stars because I wouldn't have thought of anything that I needed differently. Are you going to go round 1s, 2s, or shall I just say what else I've seen?
Let's keep going. Scream 2.
I know that I definitely saw Scream 2, and I thought, holy mackerel, this is clever because now they're making a movie of it. But I will just take this opportunity to say, by Scream 2, I knew that horror films was something that I was going to have to work really hard to endure them. And I remember my friend Amanda and I sitting in the cinema somewhere in Auckland, it could have been at the St. James. I remember specifically, we had our knees up under our chins, and I said to Amanda, say to yourself quietly, I'm the boom operator, I'm the boom operator. Because if you can suddenly bring yourself out of what's happening on screen and imagine that you're on the set holding the boom, suddenly it diffuses all of the scary parts. And so I literally remember Amanda and me, in particularly frightening parts of Scream 2, going, well, the suspense and building up and the tension and that, going, I'm the boom operator, I'm the boom operator, under our breaths while we were watching.
I mean, the boom operator doesn't get murdered, but definitely the cameraman gets murdered in some of the movies, so I don't know how helpful
I don't know, but it was that opportunity to withdraw, to pull yourself back and to make it suddenly I'm watching something artificial, I can handle this, it isn't real. Don't remember if I saw 3. I don't think I did see 4. I will have lost interest by the time that came out. And of course, I've seen the most recent.
Nice. Doug, what are your thoughts on... Take us through the 5 films.
Okay, well, coincidentally, similar journey with Sarah. So I saw the first one when it came out, loved it. And I might have revisited it once or twice in the intervening years. Revisited it for this, and I wound up more at a 3.5 level. I think it is, as you alluded to, once you know the mystery of it, a combination of that and some of the elements that haven't aged so well.
Like what sort of things?
I think it feels quite 90s. It feels a bit wooden in its filmmaking at points, and that's actually something that, looking at the new movie, I think actually the radio silence filmmakers are really strong in a lot of their staging of some of the moments.
Right.
The actual drama falls a little flat for me. But also I think there's a growing nuance around understanding how trauma actually affects people and ripples through things in that it feels a little glib and bullshitty in the original that wouldn't have mattered at the time. But I think that's one of the hallmarks of this elevated horror thing is you talk about the Hereditaries and the Babadooks and those which get quite literally name dropped in it. They all really foreground characters' actual trauma, not just in a I went through this and this is a MacGuffin for bringing forward the plot, but it's actually rippling through the performances in a way that I really actually think only David Arquette really fully taps into in this 2022 film, but certainly in the 1996 one just really kind of only ripples at a surface level. And so that's it's probably unfair, and I think if I just discovered it fresh in 2022 and had never watched it, I think probably the clever elements would have overweighed it. So I would still say it'd be perfectly fair for a first-time viewer to go rave over it.
Rave over Scream 1.
Yeah. And Scream 2 I haven't seen since like 99 or 2000. I still distinctly remember that opening kill at the movie opening in the bathroom.
Yeah.
Is it? I thought it was a guy that gets killed.
He is the first body, and her
Jada
boyfriend
gets killed up on the stage.
Yeah.
Oh,
and the audience thinks it's part of the
film.
Yeah.
Oh,
Brilliant.
right, okay.
It's so clever.
That part I don't even remember. All I remember is the kind of the voice, which is a Friday the 13th reference, I think, and then the knife coming through the bathroom stall.
Yeah.
And that's all I remember. I remember it being pretty good. And then before we went to see this, we watched a 10-minute YouTube recap of the 4 films,
which is super useful, by the way.
Yeah.
I'm just setting up because I'm like, I don't even know which characters have made it this far anymore, which didn't, which I'd forgotten about, and that was very good. It didn't leave me with a strong desire to see Scream 3 or Scream 4. I got the impression that Scream 4 was probably the one to seek out if I were to seek out one. And then, it takes me to Scream 5, which on a review I gave Scream 3.5 stars, 1996, and I gave this one 3 stars, which is still mildly positive. I think the chase scenes and all the mechanics of it are really great. I just thought the actual melodrama of it and some of even the music choices and stuff feel trapped in this sort of... I'm not sure if it's quotation marks when they have this kind of emo music or if it's these oldsters being like, this must be what the kids are like today or something between that.
We'll talk about what I thought of 5 when we get back. So,
Yeah, cool.
Jeremy, what's your journey?
Take us on your journey.
Well, I don't remember when I first saw Scream. It wasn't I remember it being around when I was, 11, 12 years old, and people would watch it at parties and things. But I was never allowed to watch horror movies, and I don't think I would have really enjoyed it as a kid. I might have, but I must have come to the Scream franchise in my sort of adult years or my my university years. I can't remember, but I remember watching them and really enjoying the first one and the second and third one. Third one we'll talk about. And then when the fourth one came out, I was so excited and I loved every minute of it because it was the first one I'd actually got to watch. And I was really satisfied with the way they dealt with the subject matter. And so I was very excited about this one. And I rewatched the 4 films at the end of last year in preparation for this 5th one coming out.
Yeah.
I had a great time. So first one I absolutely love. It's in my top 50 movies of all time. It's for all of the things you said, I totally agree. It's very 90s, but
it's of its time.
But I love it because of that now, because it's 25 years ago and we don't have movies like that anymore, and it's very much of its era. I think there's that and Clueless, and there's a few other ones as well that really, I guess, typify that time where there was a lot of high school 90s movies that were sort of the bane of cinema for a while, but have since. They don't get made anymore.
I think that also may just be an age gap where 80s stuff really hits that nostalgia button for me in a way that 90s stuff doesn't quite, because maybe I still feel like I'm living through.
Yeah, true. That's probably fair, because I would have been that. I'm a '90s kid. Like that's my childhood. Second one is great. I think they did a really good job. It's got some really interesting things in there around opera, and Sydney is studying to be an actor at university. One of the few films that doesn't take place in Hillsborough. Hillsborough? That's where I live.
Woodsboro.
I live in Hillsborough.
Yeah.
Woodsboro.
Yeah.
One of the two movies that don't take place, which I've seen a critique of this. Well, the moving forward of the series, that they need to take it out of Woodsboro is kind of where it needs to go again. But yeah, all about sequels, and they have a discussion in film class about the greatest sequels, and it's a good time. The third movie, I love the concept of the third film, which is it takes place on the set of Stab 3, and the cast of characters, Neve Campbell, Gale Weathers, Sidney Prescott, Gale Weathers, and Dewey, they end up having to fight Ghostface alongside their actor counterparts. So you've got Parker Posey playing the Gale Weathers character, and them kind of having this rivalry, and Parker Posey's character is attracted to Dewey. So it's just this wonderful silliness.
Is Tori Spelling in that one?
I think because
she's referenced in the first film. In the first film, somebody, could be Neve Campbell, says, knowing my luck, they'll make a film and they'll cast Tori Spelling as
I think
me.
she's in the second one.
Right, oh right,
She's in the second one. And the second one's really clever in that, I realised this when I was watching it last year, it has clips of the movie throughout. And it has interviews with Liev Schreiber's character, who you think is a potential... he's the one that potentially murdered Sydney's mother, but gets out of prison because they prove it's the two killers from the first film. And then he's a suspect through most of the movie, and he ends up saving Sydney at the end of the day, and it's quite a sort of a moment of redemption. But you get key... so, spoiler alert, the murderer in the second one, the kind of key murderer, there's one person helping her, is Billy Loomis's mother, which is a wonderful callback to what
Friday the 13th as well.
Friday the 13th, Jason, and of course the opening of the first movie.
And Vertigo. Not Vertigo, Psycho.
Yeah. Yes, but...
Wait.
Psycho is the mother, but it's...
Actually,
she's dead.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, that's right.
It's the other way around.
Okay, whatever.
But the key thing about, and she even looks like the Friday the 13th mother and things. The key thing about that movie is that you don't know. There's no mention of Billy Loomis.
Yeah.
And there's no mention of his mother for the whole movie, and it's a reveal at the end. And the only reason that reveal works is because you have got the exposition through the clips of the movie of Scream.
Stab, you mean? The
Stab in film movie. And so you think it's this joke, but every moment of that being presented as a kind of joke scene, Tori Spelling is in that, is exposition around Billy Loomis and his mother.
So that justifies what would otherwise be one of those really annoying murder mysteries where it turns out that it's the gardener who turned up in Act 5. And you're like, wait, what?
It's really clever. And I didn't realise that until I was watching it last time, because I was like, why do they keep showing this movie in this? But beyond the opening
That is
and
clever.
it works to works as the opening conceit, and then it works to...
And Wes Craven directed 2 and 3 and 4.
And 4.
Right, okay, nice.
Sorry, I'm getting off track. So number 3... Yeah, the idea is that they're on the set, and so the conceit of it is great. It's a great progression.
Yeah, I'd like that.
But the film was marred in, as so often it is, with messy production. One of the key influences or things that affected it was the Columbine massacre, and how they needed to they needed to bring the violence right down, and they needed to make it more jokesy. I think even Harvey Weinstein was behind the move, and I think probably... with the state of the nation, probably the right move, but they should have just held off on making the movie. And so what you get is a messy movie. It's goofy. It's tonally not hitting the mark like the other films.
Kevin Williamson's whole career was actually sort of hit a speed bump because of that, because his feature debut was a film called Killing Mrs. Tingle, about a high school teacher and some kids who want to take revenge on her. And then and then as it was leading up, it was like, so they wound up retitling it Teaching Mrs. Tingle, and wound up pulling things back and stuff to try to make it work, and it flopped at the box office. And so it's interesting, the whole effect
also he did
moral panics around that time had.
It's interesting you say about Kevin Williamson, because I didn't know that, but he also it's the only film he didn't write. He didn't write the third film.
Okay.
And it shows and I think his idea was not taken seriously, or I don't know.
Right.
So it's still a messy movie. I still love the conceit. It's the only film with one killer. When you clearly see the fingerprints all over it, that there's supposed to be two killers. The Emily Mortimer's playing the Neve Campbell character in the movie.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
She's clearly supposed to be the other killer, which makes so much sense what a cool idea that Neve Campbell would face off with her counterpart.
Yes.
And I think the script leaked, and so they had to change the ending, and it's a messy situation. But yeah. Anyways, fourth one I loved. Do you know the whole twist of the fourth one?
We watched the thing, but I can't remember.
So the twist with the fourth one is, what's her name? Emma Roberts plays Neve Campbell's younger cousin, and one of the Culkin brothers plays the Randy version of Randy.
Yep.
The two surviving kids from the first movie, archetypes, and it turns out that they're the two murderers, and that actually they're trying to do it to get their own attention and story. And
also, there's a movie being made, and it turns out, or is this number 3, where it turns out that Neve Campbell's, she had a brother.
Yeah, that's the third one.
Right. Okay.
It's real
the
stretch.
Director. Yeah, blah,
it's a
blah,
real
blah.
stretch.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyways, bring us to number 5. I loved number 5. I really liked bringing in the Billy Loomis lore with what's her name? Her name's Sam Carpenter in the film, which is a great.
Now she's your friend from In the Heights.
She's in the Heights.
Bloomin' Vanessa from In the Heights.
What's her name? Melissa Barrera.
Yes.
And I just thought, in terms of like nuance, Doug, you're talking about nuance and awareness of trauma. I think as well awareness of people dealing with schizophrenia, and how so often they are painted as the psychopaths in these films, and how wonderful it was to see our lead dealing with these visions of Billy Loomis.
I will just say, not in a politically correct way, just in a kind of way. The thing that I pondered on was, effectively, Billy Loomis is a murderer from number 1. So effectively, he is a serial killer, he is a bad person, and now he's sort of being the angel on his daughter's shoulder and saying, come on now, I'm with you, I'll support you, go ahead and do it. But she is not being posited as a psycho killer, she's our heroine, so we need her to live. And I found that a little bit, I wouldn't say potentially distasteful, because I'm not sure I got quite as far as that, but it's awkward. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I'm interested in general, actually, because you're somebody who often finds films in this genre distasteful or morally aberrant or other things. And so I'm curious, generally, if you don't feel that way about the whole series, or if it's just something that the entertainment of it makes up for the...
No, I don't think it's it's not the entertainment of it that mitigates it for me, but it is the meta-ness. It is... If something can be clever, and it can be doing a bit of a commentary, and it can be talking a bit about sequels versus requels versus reboots, etc., I find that sort of rhetoric really interesting, or that dialogue interesting. And I find subversion of tropes really interesting, like let's get rid of Drew Barrymore at the beginning. But I have to say, you touched on this, Doug, when you said that back in 96... they didn't take very seriously at all the fact that Sidney Prescott's mother had been raped and murdered, and they were just like, don't you think you need to move on, blah blah. And it was a plot, it was something to propel the plot. Now we're in 2022. There did seem to be a heck of a lot more talk around trauma, and that was really interesting. I did think at the very beginning, when that poor girl in the purple top, who of course is the protagonist's little sister, and survives, which is another nice subversion.
Really, really thought she was the murderer because of that.
Totally thought she was going to die at the beginning. And I found the stalking and killing of her very, very, very uncomfortable and distasteful. And I know that it's how horror movies go. And so, in a way, for her not to die, I was quite relieved, because if she had just been slaughtered at the beginning, because the slaughter of Drew Barrymore, and particularly when she's taken outside and then strung up, it is grotesque.
It is. It's impressive. It's really
it
visceral.
Goes there. It goes there. And nowadays, I mean, that's just not my genre at all, not my wheelhouse. And so that's why I need it to be restrained or clever or something, or a parody or something like that, in order to not just feel this is gratuitously horrible, you know.
See, I love the violence. I mean, I don't love violence really, but I love the commitment to the genre. And I think when the films have, like I said, 3 have tried to have its cake and eat it too, in terms of let's be this horror movie but pull it back a bit. There's something that doesn't work in the DNA of it. I do think this film did step over into another edge, which was at the end, when Sam gives into her full, the daughter of Billy Loomisness, and she really stabs a lot of times one of the murderers. And I was like, oh, okay, this film is saying something about where she is at. But I love that, because I think the alternative is, and I've said this before, and Tarantino talks about it, when our protagonists decide to take the upper ground at the final moment of the movie and not kill the person that's gone around killing everyone. I'm like, just kill the murderer!
Yeah.
Like, we want to see them get shot in the face. Like, that's the tension that's built up over this time. I don't want to see either of those two people survive the movie because our protagonist has taken mercy on them when they've just killed about 10 people we care about.
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting, and I think it's interesting you ask as well, Doug, about, in terms of Sarah, your connection to this genre, and whether it is, how much of it is, whether it's just the visceralness of it. I don't know.
Oh, and also though, I mean, Doug knows that I've always had a bugbear about the depiction of mental illness in horror films. And back in the olden days, when I didn't know so well, I wouldn't have noticed so much. But in more recent renderings of Halloween and whatnot, I am utterly fed up with. It is a trope, and it's not a groundless trope. But I'm utterly fed up with somebody having to be psychotic, or I hate when they go insane, because insane is a legal term, not a psychological term. But never mind. Not a medical term, but anyway, I hate that, having to be, that person acted that way because they're just crazy.
Well, that's the psycho thing, right? As well, because that's someone who's either transgender or gender fluid or something. He enjoys dressing in his mother's clothes, and that becomes the explanation for why he's done all these horrible things.
But even that is actually they're actually trying to get some more of a narrative than just he's crazy.
Yeah, or weird.
Or
weird.
Insane,
Or gay. Sometimes it's the gay character who's the killer, and
I think
the characterization.
There's a lot of different flavors of the distasteful in this. What I'm trying to say is that some of them are specifically gross to us from a contemporary perspective because they're about gay or transgender, and others are just kind of, they don't get beyond, he did it because he's crazy.
That's true. But what I'm saying is, perhaps what mitigates it in this one is that things are based on trauma. And so actually, Billy Loomis was traumatized in some way, which is why he did what he did. I can't speak for his mate, the other bloke.
Michael Rappaport. Yeah.
No, it's not Michael Rappaport.
Oh, no, it's the guy that looks like Matthew
Lillard.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think he does
Matthew
look
Lillard,
like Michael Rappaport. But Matthew Lillard. I can't speak for why he got involved other than peer pressure. Not very interested in peer pressure.
Well, there's that whole theory that he's gay, right? There's that. There's a whole lot of sub things with his, which I think the two actors added as a subtext. Like, there's a lot of improvisation that happened.
Right.
In that first movie, he gets hit with a phone, and he goes, "You hit me with a phone," which was just a mistake. And
right.
Matthew Lillard improvised. And
right.
I watched an interview with the actors from earlier this year, and they were saying how much they loved that play of what is their relationship, what is his motivation, because it is unclear, Matthew Lillard's motivation.
So actually, if you want to get super psychological, the stuff of this that does interest me is the psychological, and it's around things like there's a mental disorder called folie à deux, which is French for madness in two people, and traditionally it happens. It's your Myra Hindley and Ian Brady in the UK, the couple who murdered a whole lot of children and buried them in the moors. It's your Heavenly Creatures scenario. So Melanie Linsky and Kate Winslet, these two young girls in Christchurch, developed an unnatural attachment and intimacy, and they fueled one another to then go ahead and commit this crime. So it's interesting with the two men, because Hitchcock's film Rope is two men,
which is based on the Leopold and Loeb murders.
Exactly, and Leopold and Loeb were actual people in America. They were actual boys with a very strong attachment, who then murdered one of their sets of parents, I believe. So that is interesting. So in a way, one of the red herrings for me in Scream 5 is that you've got the twins. So you've got the girl who plays Thaisa in Yellowjackets, Jasmin Savoy Brown, and her twin brother. Now that is a perfect opportunity for a folie à deux kind of connection that makes them commit crimes together, because they are attached by blood, by relation. That's why you get scenarios like. I won't spoil it. No, okay. I was going to mention a film that's actually a bit too current, but when you have two lovers who commit a crime together, that's what we're talking about. That is interesting to me.
That is in the DNA of what makes the formula of Scream work. And so I guess to go back to this, the kind of going through the 5 movies, in my mind, with varying degrees of quality and kind of hitting the mark, 4 of the 5 Scream films work.
Yes.
They really work. And that third film, kind of, it almost works. It just gets things off kilter. So they don't I love that explanation. They don't have 2 killers. And so things don't make sense as much. Because there's a scene where the killer he kind of implicates himself to the police through Ghostface. And I'm like, why? That doesn't make sense. Whereas when there's 2 people, you can kind of give it a bit of grace with some of the silliness.
But maybe by the time they got to the third, they thought everybody knows there are 2 killers, so we're going to subvert it by only giving them 1.
Yeah, maybe. It's just not very successful. And, so I guess one of the cool things that I've really enjoyed about 4 and 5 is that they have taken risks and they've been able to generally pull them off. And this 5th one, I was like, where are they going to go with this in terms of the commentary on films? And I thought the dual thing, and you alluded to it before, Doug, but the dual thing of this idea of the requel, how the Force Awakens is the perfect example, and you remake a movie but you treat it like a sequel, and you kind of it hits the nostalgia kind of buttons. And then this other thing of the fan base taking something so seriously, and I think what a great motivation for our murderers, that they're so frustrated with what they're getting that they're going to create their own Scream fodder so that there can be a movie made.
And of course the meta-ness of it is that we, especially Doug and me who saw the original back in 96, I was desperate to see this latest one for nostalgia. I wanted to see Courtney Cox. May I say, it did occur to me, and I hope she's not listening, that Courtney Cox certainly looks as though she too has been under the knife. But
we had that in Scream 4. I think she's even publicly said that she's stopped with Botox, but she still has her facelift and things.
Sure.
But she actually looks, I think, more. She has more facial expression in this one than she did in the 4th one, where she was still.
But I wanted to see Neve Campbell again, and I wanted to see Dewey, and of course they kill Dewey. That is a spoiler. They kill Dewey. And we're used to our main characters, or our main characters, making it through, right? So actually, good on them.
And that's a really emotionally interesting moment of the film, actually, when the killers are actually these fans of it, and you kind of understand that in retrospect. This idea that they, it'd be like stepping into Star Wars and getting to kill Han Solo with a lightsaber or something.
Well, it's not David Chapman killing John Lennon. He didn't hate John Lennon or John Lennon's music. He was a crazed fan. So in a way, they don't care that they're killing Dewey. Is it Dewey Cox? What's his name?
I don't know if we know his last name.
No, Dewey Cox, that's from some other...
that's Walk Hard.
Yeah, Dewey Riley. They don't care that they're killing Detective Dewey Riley. Because they're just sort of inserting themselves, I suppose, into the control of this narrative.
That whole scene is incredible, that sequence, because,
In the hospital?
That's one of the ones I'm talking about, with the kind of the filmmaker's control of set pieces. That, and also the killing at the home of the policewoman's son.
Oh, that's incredible. Okay, so let's talk about... Can we talk about the hospital, and then we'll talk about that one?
Yeah.
So with the hospital... It's just the shots of the girl. We know she's had body trauma, and she's the pain of her having to wheel herself.
Yes.
And also we know that Dewey, he's been in those situations so many times. He's been stabbed and punched, and he's almost died so many times. It was quite a great payoff to that situation, and we know the double tap. You've got to go back and you've got to make sure he's dead, and it was such a and also that we know that the other characters were coming in the car, and there's a lot of pieces that are really, really well put together.
And it's devastating, because for a minute there you think he's going to be okay, and then he isn't flipping okay, because Mindy Madison, or whatever her name is, Mikey Madison, who is playing Ghostface in that scene.
The fight they're having. I mean, how is that young woman getting overpowered by this huge guy?
When my realistic mind is watching, I'm like, well, this has got to be a burly man under there, because it's got to be. And then when you learn later that actually it was like, hang on just a second, that's not very realistic.
Yeah.
Can we talk casting just quickly, because Jack Quaid, who listeners will recognise from The Boys, and he's Dennis Quaid's son. He has a big presence in this movie. Now, technically, he comes in just as the very, very nice boyfriend of the protagonist, and Sam Carpenter. I love how they always have character names that
Well,
relate
Wes,
to. Yeah,
Wes is another character.
Love
in
all
this
that
as well.
sort of thing. Yeah. Anyway, sorry. So he comes in as the boyfriend, but he's a very big character and a big personality, Jack Quaid. And then, of course, the film does that tricky thing where it accuses everybody and then exonerates everybody. So you're back to square one. So you're kind of like, well, you can't really be thinking, oh, wait a second, it might be so-and-so.
And he's introduced outside of Woodsboro.
Yes.
So he already seems like he's innocent.
That's right. And the fact that he then does, I've never seen any of these before. Although he gives it away in the very early scene where they're around at... where they're congregating is at the twins' house, and the twins inexplicably are the daughter of, or the niece, or the Randy's niece and nephew. Anyway, he says something like, "Oh, but isn't it the blah and the blah?" And nobody picks up on the fact that actually, technically, he's not meant to know. But then he pretends, doesn't he? He says, "I'm watching all of the films on Netflix at the moment."
Yeah.
Love all the references to Netflix. Anyway,
he's also watching a YouTube thing later that's listing all the problems with Stab 8.
Yeah.
And, it's like, and it's clearly like this whole YouTube channel of angered fans going on about all the things that gets wrong. And it's quite funny that the clip is like a silver masked ghost face holding a flamethrower.
I guess the point that I'm sort of labouring to make is he is the, when I say biggest, sort of most famous, I suppose, most charismatic, he has the most presence of all of those young cast members. I actually wouldn't give you tuppence for any of the others.
Jenna Ortega I thought was great.
Oh, well, she's the girl who survives at the beginning, yeah? So the younger sister, right, okay, fine. But even Thaisa, not that bothered. Yeah. And then it turns out that he is actually one of the killers. And so then it's like, oh, well, hang on a second. So your star is one of the main roles.
Well, I think that's on purpose, isn't it? Because you're like, oh, he's going to survive. We know there's a new cast. And I really thought the twins were going to die. And I thought, oh, they've got potential to. I love, what's her name? I forget her name.
Melissa Barrera, the lead?
I do love her. You said her name, Jasmin Savoy Brown.
Yes.
Because she's in The Leftovers. And she's
right.
Very, very brief in The Leftovers, but she's fantastic.
And she's in Yellowjackets.
And yes, she is. And I thought that was nice to see them survive. She's clearly going to be the film nerd. But back to that YouTube moment.
Yeah.
In that moment, there is a little Easter egg where off to the side of the screen it says, survivor from Woodsboro murders. And it's Hayden, what's her name? Hayden Panettiere.
Oh, yeah. Panettiere.
Yeah. So she plays Kirby in the fourth one. Huge fan favourite. She gets stabbed and supposedly is killed, but we don't see her die, which is always the big thing. And so the creators of this said, well, we know that she's a huge fan favourite. We want to bring her back. We didn't have a story for her this time. And so they popped this little Easter egg in there to
so
come back.
Good Lord.
And where they've done that in a reversed fashion is with the Marley Shelton. Is that her name? Marley Shelton character. So she's one of the deputies in the fourth film, sort of a foil for Gail Weathers. And you think that maybe she's the murderer. And they bring her back in this movie. And I guess to weave back to that the incredible sequence with the house and how... he's in the shower like Psycho. And then she gets killed outside in this kind of shocking scene. He dies as well. Like this, that whole sequence.
But there's like 8 fake outs before he dies. And that incredible stab through the lip.
Oh,
just really...
is it a slow stab through the
neck
when he's at the front door and you're looking at the prosthetics and going, holy mackerel.
Just as this is a complete aside, but one of the things that is, I think, really going to age poorly about this whole era of filmmaking is the limitations of COVID. And, we saw Moonfall the other day, and we're like, they can make a moonfalling look more realistic than 3 people in a car because they're shooting all this stuff in controlled green screen kind of spaces. And there's so many... If you look at the Woodsboro in the first one, there's just the extras and the movement. There's just a bit more naturalism, where here they've clearly had to stack up stuff in post to make it look like there's 6 people in the same space, and hospitals are really weirdly underpopulated. And it is just, there's this kind of and I noticed it in lots of productions. I noticed it when we watched episode 1 of Reacher on Amazon just now. There's this whole kind of, we can't have a bunch of extras, it's too risky. The Spider-Man No Way Home director was talking about how every time you see people walking down the street and 6 or 7 people walk by them, it's actually a really complicated effects shot with 5 layers of just a simple, 10 people walking down the street.
But to make it look natural.
Yeah, just to make it look like
not a video.
That they're not living in the after times.
Yeah.
It was just, but I mean, it also calls attention to just how well done those visual effects are, and how, when you get those stab effects.
I talk about visuals, not necessarily effects, but how well they've done they are. And I'm glad that we did the spoiler. You mentioned earlier about, this is a spoiler, but I don't know if you know, in your opening you mentioned that the film takes place in Billy Loomis's house, which for me was that's quite a big spoiler, because that was such a big surprise.
They only discover it,
because that blew my mind, because you're in this party and the way they're filming
it's not Billy Loomis's house. It's it's Matthew Lillard's house.
Oh, is it?
Yes. That character.
Oh, whoever's house it is. Yeah. We did the spoiler thing before you said that, so it's all good. But I just know
maybe that was a red herring, Doug. Yeah. Maybe that you were subverting our expected. No, okay. Anyway, sorry, Jeremy.
We're in this house. We're in this party, and it's been filmed in a way that you don't realize it's the house.
Yes.
And in the moment that wonderful turning shot happens, and you realize that they're in the house. And
suddenly it starts going from all the original camera angles.
It's so clever. Yeah. It's so clever. And then there's that great moment where, I've forgotten her name. She's got a wonderful name.
Yeah, Jasmin Savoy Brown.
Jasmin Savoy Brown. She's sitting
on the sofa,
Stab One,
where Randy used to sit and watching the film.
And if you think about it, the original scene is Randy watching Halloween.
Yes.
And he says, what does he say? He says, "Jamie, turn around," which of course, as the actor, that's his name as well.
Yes,
so
that's right.
Jamie, turn around. Jamie, turn around. And then this other film, which is her doing it, but it's none of the original stuff from the original. It's all, it's the Stab movie, and it's
but it's the
Jasmin.
Same room, same house.
It's so clever.
Same basement door behind her where the person comes back from.
Yeah. Yes. So clever. And turn around, and of course she finally realizes and turns around and
but that's interesting, isn't it? You're right, because so there are so many double crosses, aren't there, and so many red herrings. But when the two girls, including that Jasmin Savoy Brown and the ultimate killer, they go down into the basement, and you don't realise until later that's the basement in which Rose McGowan died in number 1.
Which, by the way, that always annoys me, but I always laugh about that in the first one. How does that work with if you think about the house in Scream, so you go down these stairs and the garage, is there just a huge gap at the back of the house where the cars drive around?
Yeah, so this is actually probably where they actually have dug out a sub-basement / garage on the side, so that the cars just pull up the driveway and go onto the side. Nonetheless, it's still
you think about where that, in terms of Scream, there's this long kind of country road.
Yeah.
Like what are they driving
it's a
around?
Badly designed.
It doesn't make sense.
Badly designed property, Jeremy. And I will just say, since we mentioned that was a terribly clever death in Scream 1, but it did always drive me nuts in a continuity way. And I don't know if you recall, but the shot of her from behind, from within the garage, and she's through the cat door or the animal door. She's actually further through in one shot than she is when the camera's looking at her from the other shot. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
There's an inconsistency there as to how much of her front half, her top half is through that gap. And so for me, that makes the whole film implausible. And that's the only thing that makes this film unbelievable.
Let's talk about this. So my boyfriend is not a fan of horrors. He loves his Pixar's and his feel-good movies, and we've been talking a lot about psychoanalyzing when he gave up on horrors, and it was probably various horror films he saw as a kid. But he decided to come with me to see this new Scream film, having never seen any Scream movies.
Right.
And we watched one of those summary videos to get him up to speed. I actually told him the entire plot in about 5 minutes.
But he hadn't even seen number 1.
No, but we watched this summary video that was effectively exactly what I just said. Which was good times. And so we went along and watched it, and the payoff was that I would watch a film with him that he wanted to watch, which we did. But
what film?
Clifford the Big Red Dog.
Oh my God!
How was it?
It was fine. Which, side note, Jack Whitehall's in that film doing an American accent, playing the brother of the main little girl's mother, and she has a British accent. So when the mother's introduced and they're talking about the dropkick uncle, I was like, well, clearly she's British because
sake.
Jack Hawk, but he has a weird American accent.
Well, there you go.
Anyways, so we went and saw Scream. We watched it. I had a great time, and my boyfriend, who's a doctor, said, "Well, this is just the amount of stabs, you would be in shock in minutes. And like his thing was that all of the stabs were so implausible.
And all the stab wounds to stomachs, right?
Yeah,
they would have bled out.
And it's the shock, I think he said. You'd be in shock. So I suppose because from the bleeding.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the only thing
that makes the Scream movies unbelievable. That's exactly right.
Right, well, let's finish off with some final thoughts. So, Doug, I might hand it to you first.
Sure. Look, it was really nice to see one of these in the big screen again, actually, and kind of go back into that, you know, the wearing a mask and everything notwithstanding and giving you another layer of meta-ness. I don't know that I need a whole new trilogy of them, but I do wonder, like, at this point in 2022, like, are we just so embedded in old IP that we're not going to be able to get back to a place of innocence where new IP can mean as much to us? So, if we're just stuck with the old IP of the past coming back, and I say this as somebody who just watched Jackass Forever earlier this week, another film about a 90s moral panic that has now become feel-good entertainment for middle-aged people, and sets up a next generation as well, there's worse you can do.
Nice. Sarah, what are your thoughts? Final thoughts?
I still think they're clever, and I'm really glad of that. And there was, even if I didn't adore the cast of Scream 5, if you'll forgive me, Scream 5 particularly, I don't think that they're a strong group of young people. Well, I don't even know. I mean, so what, Sarah? It doesn't matter, does it? If half of them are going to die, it doesn't matter. But anyway, but point being, even if I didn't love that, I still really appreciated the talk around franchises, the notion of a requel and all that sort of thing. I still found it frightening enough, gave me the horrors and all that sort of thing. And there was that healthy dose of nostalgia as well. So, yeah, fully enjoyed it. Think that there are two very interesting films to compare and to track. I mean, you know, what are we, 25 years effectively. I'm sure there'll be more Screams, and I just really hope that I think for as long as they continue to employ fresh directors now, because sadly Wes is gone, and you'll have noticed, obviously, this one was dedicated to him.
In the font from the original.
Nice. And the fact that these two directors brought us Ready or Not, which is a terrific house horror film, then as long as they continue to have clever people doing meta things, then I think that this, maybe we will get to Scream 8.
In a gold mask.
Maybe. Yeah, that's right.
Well, I agree with both of you, and you know, Doug, you're mentioning about, you know, original IP, and that's something that comes up a lot, particularly when we talk about Marvel movies and the state of cinema and how it seems to be so obsessed with nostalgia and sequel mining, which, you know, I love sequels, but I do think that there is a difference to where we are now compared to where we were 25 years ago.
And that it's an interesting point at the end of the film, of course. The Babadook gets name checked again, and this whole elevated horror is all about sort of having a brand where original movies are coming through, and the extent to which Scream can probably never actually become an elevated horror is that it's so mired in its own kind of style of filmmaking. Like, you couldn't really push it into looking like something like The Lighthouse or Midsommar and have it still feel like a Scream movie.
But you don't need it to, right? It's not what we want. It's not what we're going for.
Yeah, but it's just that question of if elevated horror has its own rules, is there a version of this of Scream franchise that could be elevated horror?
Well, that
and yet
would be wouldn't that be an interesting? That would be an interesting thing.
Someone give Ari Aster a call.
That's right.
I mean, if they could pull it off, I'd
like to see what they do. Yeah.
But I guess that's to the point that kind of Sarah made as well around the cast, and I think for me, I'm pretty forgiving of some of those things because as long as they kind of hit the right beats, it's like a Pirates of the Caribbean film. They had to really stuff it up for me to not enjoy it.
Yeah.
Which was that fifth one, but I was still there for the other three or whatever it was, four.
Yeah.
So for me, I loved the fifth one. Even the third one that doesn't work for me, I still get some enjoyment from what they're trying to do. And this film has been hugely successful at the box office. It's been the most successful since the third one, and I think it's potentially even looking like it's going to eclipse some of those earlier films.
Which in the COVID times is doubly impressive.
Yeah, true. And they're already greenlit the sixth film with the same creative team. So I'm all for it. I'll keep going as long as they don't royally screw it up. I'll be there paying my ticket and having a great time.
And just don't take Josh.
Yeah, we'll see. He might be all for it now that he knows what happened.
Maybe you can have him on the podcast next time to give a trauma perspective.
Yeah.
Good times. Well, thank you for listening to another episode of Cinema in Context. If you enjoyed our podcast, then please share it with your film-loving friends. You can listen to Cinema in Context through SoundCloud, Spotify, Stitcher, Radio Public, Amazon Music, and Apple Podcasts. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram, which are great places to let us know what you think of this episode or give us suggestions for future films to discuss and compare. Look out for our next episode in a month's time, and until then,
no order mai!